Plans to allow scientists to create embryos that are part human and part animal are set for approval by the official regulator in Britain. These hybrid embryos are seen by the country's leading scientists as a vital step in the search for cures for diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. It's a highly controversial procedure and is banned in some European countries. Our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh has the story.
This embryo is part mouse, part cow. In a few months, this Newcastle lab is hoping to create a human-cow hybrid. If that leaves you uneasy, the scientists here understand how you feel.
It does seem a little abhorrent from a first analysis, the fact that we're mixing bits of cow cells with bits of human cells, and people would automatically think, yeah, well, okay. But what you have to understand is that we're actually using very, very little information from the cow in order to do this reprogramming idea.
This is highly complex science, the creation of cytoplasmic hybrids, known as cybrid embryos. The starting point is a cow's egg, which is cut open by a laser. The DNA is sucked out. The next step is to take a human cell, perhaps from a patient with Parkinson's disease, and inject it into the egg. Now, this is the crucial point at which an embryo is created, because by using an electric shock, the hybrid embryo starts growing, the cells subdividing. In reality, it's smaller than a pinhead, and when it's just 6 days old, the embryo shell is broken open. Inside are stem cells, the body's master cells. The ultimate aim is to reprogram them into any tissue in the body, for example, nerve cells, heart cells, or brain cells. If it wasn't for the cocktail of pills he takes every few hours, Frank Brooks could barely walk. He has Parkinson's disease, the degenerative brain disorder, and strongly supports the new research.
It would be an enormous benefit if that cure was developed to the people who are young enough to benefit from it, because it's going to be a few years before it's here. But if we don't start now, we're never going to get there.
Approval for this research is a victory for scientists, as ministers originally planned to ban hybrid embryos. But religious and moral opponents are worried.
I think this is a further violation of the rights of the embryo, in that the embryo is deprived not only of its life in the course of the experiment, but of any human parents. It is further dehumanised by the very method of its creation.
Scientists say this research is of profound importance and could lead to new treatments for a host of diseases, like diabetes and Alzheimer's. But all this is years away. The science is just beginning. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
And I'll be back to look at how the public might respond to this complicated procedure and the politics of this, talking with a professor of bioethics in just a moment. First, let's go back now to the news that Britain is set to approve plans which will allow scientists to create embryos that are part human and part animal. Joining me here in the studio is Dr. Ruth Faden. She's Professor of Bioethics at Johns Hopkins University. Thanks so much for coming in. We heard there in that report that we ran earlier that a lot of scientists recognise that people are going to be appalled at the very idea of an embryo being created that's part cow, for example, part human. They really will be, won't they?
Well, it's hard to say. I think there certainly will be people who will find this disturbing, unnatural, and perhaps unacceptable. The question is, on reflection, as people understand exactly what is done in the science, will they still find it unacceptable? And will they find it unacceptable against the potential gain to science and medical progress that could result?
Given the political complications here, difficulties in trying to push ahead with stem cell research, could you ever see a plan like that, which is about to be approved in Britain, it looks like, being approved here in America?
It's a very good question. There certainly are teams of scientists in the United States who are keen to do exactly the same work that is being proposed to do in the UK. Frankly, I think the UK is going to set potentially a standard. If this work goes well, in the UK, both from the standpoint of the science and also from the standpoint of societal oversight and response, then I think the answer is yes for the United States.
But people are going to ask themselves, how do we make sure, and this is often the case where science leapfrogs ahead of the politics and ahead of the ethics, how do we make sure that those scientists aren't ever going to use these hybrid embryos to produce something that's part cow, part human?
Well, that's part of the concern and worry that many people in the general public have. And here again, it'll be very interesting to watch what happens in the UK. The question is, how well can societies regulate advances in science? The UK is trying to do this in a way that extends the bounds of science while still maintaining a very serious oversight from the standpoint of regulatory authorities and indeed from the standpoint of Parliament. It's an open question how well we can contain technologies. This is a case of a good technology potentially could be misused.
Dr. Ruth Fade, thanks very much. Again, science and politics, always the two are linked.